Serious, people who witnessed, all were victims of attempted murder. What happened? Dude stabbed a guy at the ATM and tried to grab his money. Dude that got stabbed punched him in the face and knocked him flat. Then a bunch of people grabbed him and he got arrested. I assume the stabbed guy is fine. He didn't seem too bothered about having had a knife in him a few minutes previously. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. Been shot at twice in my life. Both misses. The first time I was 17 years old walking home from work. I worked at a laundromat in a pretty bad neighborhood which closed at 10 PM. By the time we cleaned up and locked up it was around 11 PM. Walking down this street which was desolate at that hour I notice a car coming up from behind me. The street runs east-west and I'm walking east on the north side of the street. As the car pulls up adjacent to me I see the explosion from the barrel of the gun and hear something whiz by. This area was sort of industrial with hills of crushed stone piled high. The result of a steel mill slag hill. I ran like the wind between hills of rocks and made it home safely. The car took off right away and didn't seem to make any attempt to follow me. Completely random. Second time an armed robber shot at me during a pursuit and hit my squad car. Missed me though and nothing was really damaged except for a hole in the bumper. It was Thanksgiving and my family was headed to my aunt and uncle's house. We were early so we decided to stop by the graveyard where my grandpa and other family members were buried. This is a little old graveyard across the street from a newer much larger cemetery. We had to hide behind my great aunt's grave as we were caught in a drive-by shooting. Apparently the Nortoners and Suriners both bury their people at the newer cemetery across the street and we were caught in the crossfire. I could see the bullets hitting the ground near me. We also had our new puppy in the car and were hoping she didn't get hit as we lay there. Then after a while the cops arrived and parked across the street. They were talking to witnesses and basically told us, yeah, this happens all the time. We then got to my aunt and uncle's house and I drank a lot of vodka. When I was a kid, another kid a grade ahead of me put a knife to my throat and took me into the woods. I don't know anything about what happened firsthand. I repressed the memory and didn't know until my brothers asked me questions about it years later and it was a blank spot. The kid who took me hostage wasn't really punished. He was grounded for 3 days. His mom didn't want him to not be able to watch the Thanksgiving football game with his uncles. My parents moved us out of that school district within a year or two after. It has affected the last 20 years of my life in a lot of negative ways. Mostly causing hypervigilance, anxiety, and panic all the time. And because it is a repressed memory, it has been really hard to find and fix the source of the problem. A few years ago, maybe 4 or 5, I was at a water park thing with some friends. I went off on my own into a large pool. As I was swimming around peacefully I saw a very tall man. He approached me and I felt this sharp pain in my stomach. A gut feeling or something. But before I could react, he looked at me in the eye and grabbed my arms firmly and then ducked me underwater. This random person tried to drown me. So I'm freaking scared out of my mind and panicking. I started to kick my legs around, hoping it would do something. And lucky for me, it did. I ended up kicking him hard enough to make him let me go and I booked it out of there. I eventually made it to my friends and told them everything that had happened. It was weird. A guy shot at me. He missed and drove away. I lived. That simple? No details? Don't know if it was attempted murder but it looked pretty bad. When I was in 2nd grade 2 teen girls and 1 teen boy brought a 3rd teen girl to a hidden area and beat the shit out of her. They took turns stomping on her, kicking her face, hitting her. She was a bloody mess. 2 other friends were with me when we spotted them through the bushes. We saw the brutality for about a minute before we took off and banged on a door and told an adult what was happening. He ran over to the teens and got them off of her. We watched, terrified, through the bushes. I remember they kept yelling at him that she deserved the beating meanwhile she was lying there bleeding and crying. It was awful. He pretty much ran them off and then ran back and called 911. I watched them load her up on a stretcher. I don't know the outcome. I assume she was okay. I don't know if the girls and guy ever got in trouble. The police never spoke to us kids. Only the adult. The closest time? My female parents tried to cut my throat while my father used me. She didn't get it right. Shallow cut on my throat. Worse cut by the collarbone. Oh. You again. Yeah, your life start could have gone a lot better. Not trying to offend. Used you? TLDR at the bottom. About 7 years ago. I was dating a girl that I was so sure that I loved. When you're 19. You always think you're in love, right? I used to go cliff diving, wakeboarding, and jet skiing at Lake Pleasant outside of Phoenix, AZ pretty often. The last time we went alone and ended up being the only people at this one area of the lake that had a small beach. I wish I remembered more than I do, but here's what I got. She was swimming behind me. We were gonna go out to a deeper area of the lake to kinda just float there and make out, as teenagers do, and the next thing I knew I felt weight on my shoulder pushing me underwater. She was maybe 140 pounds and super muscular, and I was still 95 pounds soaking wet. I woke up in the hospital. Apparently someone had showed up not too long after and she played it off as if I wasn't a strong swimmer and she was trying to save me, and they called 911. I was a competitive swimmer. Now, I have PTSD from it and am terrified of getting into water. I won't even sit in a bathtub. The nightmares are still horrible to this day. TLDR. My ex tried to drown me and it gave me PTSD. I never realized, but this was very traumatic. So when I was a child, 6 or 7, I had a sketchy neighbor. My mom didn't have good feeling about him and neither did I. Then eventually we decided to move. He had a wife but no children. However, the way the house was placed from my window, I could see into his garden, but he couldn't see anything of my house, so it was easy to spy on him. 2 nights before we were supposed to move, I heard water running from his garden, so naturally I went to go spy on him. I now wish I hadn't. I saw he was filling a bucket with water. He then went back inside to fetch something and it was a body bag, which I assume it's his wife's body, but 7 years old me didn't get it. He then takes the bucket inside and I presume he was cleaning blood. 7 years old me wondered why his wife wasn't cleaning, but then I remembered I saw her leave for a vacation, but when he was coming back from the airport he looked a bit stressed, but I didn't think it mattered. Anyway, he puts the bag in his car and drives off to probably dump her body. I never thought anything of it until I was like 12, when we had already moved, only then realized I witnessed the finishing up of a murder and thought nothing of it. I will put this as briefly as I can. I was at a bar with a girl I met on a dating site. We sit down and we talk and eventually I lost interest. It was just regular banter until she asked me for my address. Even though I was probably kinda drunk, this still set off an alarm in my head. I asked why. She said no big deal. Just maybe we could order in tomorrow or something. Or something similar to that. I remembered my childhood address number, so I gave her that with some random street. Eventually we go our ways. And I drive home. About halfway home I realize she is behind me. I play it off until she is literally on my street following me. I get out and say, "What are you doing?" I see nothing but a brief movement and I get stabbed twice. I was in such shock that I just stood there till I was shoved down and robbed of my wallet, phone and keys. Also, she was able to steal my TV, load it into her car, and she was gone. I was so lightheaded and felt so weak. But I managed to make it inside to call 911 on the house phone. Luckily I was stabbed in the arm and stomach, in places that were non-life threatening. She never got caught though. Last I heard, the police were in pursuit of her. This one is from my dad, not me, but he was a trucker in the 80s and he was backed into a dock unloading in Chicago. He had just gotten lunch from across the street and was talking to the security guard at the facility he was at. And he seen a guy get shot in the head where he had just gotten lunch. I worked at a psych ward and a teen girl tried to stab me in the throat with a Bic pen. Luckily she was like 110 pounds, so I got her down and got the pen away. She was also singing Teenagers by My Chemical Romance the entire time. Not really attempted murder, but I was almost the victim of a drunk high driving hit and run. It's kept me up a lot. I was attacked by a guy in the streets when I had 15, but he only tried to rob me first, so I was all like, you do not scare me bruh. He was also in a state of drunkenness or something like that, but he just pulled a knife out and tried to stab me in the chest. But he was so drunk and slow that I just dodged it and punched him in the head. While I do not know if murder was the intent, serious harm most likely was. A coworker, an open lesbian, was pushed down the stairs by a recently hired Muslim employee who clearly wasn't having it. She thankfully didn't really get hurt. Managed to grab the railing and all. And the man was promptly fired. Which is pretty lenient considering that was definitely jail worthy. I wasn't sad to see him go cause he had also shouted at me for whistling once, claiming he wasn't allowed to listen to that. I assume he was some very conservative Muslim. Wahhabism maybe. Not really a murder attempt, but I was walking in the street to go to see some friends. A random guy told me to come. He asked me, do you have some cocaine? I've said no. He slapped me, and he put a knife in front of my face. He cut me next to my eyebrow. Then he ran away. I think if I've made a single movement, I would have been stabbed. I lived in a group home with a girl who was a psychopath. She stalked my every moment, and once she punched a hole from her room into mine to watch me sleep or something creepy like that. But after I moved out about a year later, I was told by another girl that lived with that she did the same thing but ended up stabbing another girl 5 times. TLDR. Was stalked by girl who ended up stabbing someone. Sorry if there is spelling mistakes or anything like that. I missed out on a lot of school as a kid. Wasn't me, but a story my dad told me. He told me that he was on the highway one day and in the center lane. He said that someone started merging into his lane from the right lane and didn't see him because of his blind spot. This caused my dad to swerve into the left lane, which caused him to cut off the other driver in the left lane. These things happen all the time, so nothing new. Well, apparently the dude he cut off in the left lane didn't take kindly to this and got up on my dad's ass. My dad said this guy kept trailing him while riding his ass for about 2 or 3 exits. Dad kept heading north while the driver on his ass cut to the right to merge off the highway. I guess that driver was super salty because he pulled out a pistol and shot at my dad as he was turning off the highway. Bullet caught the A-pillar just behind his head. He never managed to find out what happened to the dude since this was in the 80s and dash cams and security cameras weren't as present as they are now, but he told me that he did read a news article not long after that saying how an unknown suspect, driving the same type of car that shot at him, was wanted for running over 2 people on the side of the road. I used to hang with Uranus when I was young and stupid. So this is an interesting story. I never thought I'd read anything about the Sur or the Norte on Reddit, so this is a first. But anyway, I'm glad everyone was okay. It's a shame that these moth-earthers can't even manage to be civilized on a holiday that's all about family, real family. But anyway, where you from? Saw my boarding school roommate murder his girlfriend. Had to go to court. I broke down. Seeing this dude I lived with, babysat his little brother and was generally a really nice guy, murder someone hurt, and then he asked me to deny anything happened so he could look after his little brother. I was in shambles. He's in prison for 40 years as he was a minor, 15, and his little brother is getting looked after by another one of our roommates. He just had open heart surgery. No one told him why his brother is gone. We told him he died. He was 7 when it happened. He's now 10. I was 13. I am not gonna say much, but here is one of that moments. A guy tried to attack me with a hammer. I grabbed it, turned him around and hit the back of his head 3 times. The poor guy started vomiting blood and I held his head to the ground because otherwise he would be drowned in his own blood. So the guy wanted to hurt or kill me and my friends I don't know, and out of self-defense I almost killed him.